that CBN guns for stable currency, FBI's as rate hikes halt businesses. Now we have an infograph here where we have the MPR raised by 150 BPS to 26.25%, which is the new interest rate. Now we're having that the monetary policy rate is actually 26.25%, and then the cash reserve ratio is at 45%. Liquidity ratio is at 30%. Asymmetry corridor is about plus 100, minus 100, and then we know that our current inflation is about 33.7%. So you can look more detail into the outcome of that meeting on page 6. Still on the Guardian newspaper, we have APC dismisses merger and talk as Obi visit Labour Party Secretariat. We will recall there was a meeting that he had with the PDP, and then there were talks that there was going to be a merger, and here APC is dismissing any merger talk with Peter Obi as he returned back to the Labour Party Secretariat. More detail can be found on page 6. Again, Labour rejects 54,000 naira minimum wage proposal. We will recall that initially it was 48,000. Now the federal government has increase it a bit to 54,000 naira, and Labour is still refusing. More detail found on page 3. Yobe, Benue, Anambra senators clash over farmers' headers crisis. Detail found on page 3. Bandits kill 46 person race home in Plateau. Even though we're having the police are saying that just about 7 people were killed, and here we're having the paper saying about 46 persons are killed. So we hope that they can come to understanding. Let us have the real number. And this happened in Wasi local government area of Plateau State. Court squashes tenure extension of Rivers local government and chairman. Detail found on page. And then we have the last story on the paper here. Nigerian startup get 29.3% of Africa's $15 billion funding in 5 years. More detail of the business story can be found on page 15, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
The Vanguard newspaper, from the top we have petrol. Marketers fret as depot prices rises to 710 naira per litre in Lagos. On insecurity, gunmen kill 40 burn houses in Plateau community. You can find more details on page 6. Students loan scheme non-discriminatory, says Vice President Shetima. Vanguard 2024 economic discourse holds tomorrow. And the big story here says inflation battle. CBN raises interest rate to 26.25%. OPS protests. The writer says MPR hikes pose danger to economy. This additional burden for businesses of Nigeria. On minimum wage, Labour federal government meeting ends in deadlock. FG's 54,000 naira offer is wage reduction, says Labour. No governor in attendance, and meeting to reconvene today. CDWR calls for mass action. Reforms will eliminate waste, corruption. This is coming from Edu. You can find more details if you Kena Ogiadome Omo Bayo mobilized for Igodalo assure victory. You can find more details if you're so interested on page 7. Most of the procedures used by modern consultation with the to see more details about this particular write-up, you can find it on page 23 of the Vanguard newspaper. On sports, Finidi says World Cup target keeps me on my toes. And these are all the news stories you can find on the Vanguard news.
All right, before we move further, Lois, I would just like us, because I think this the big story is mostly the story we'll be seeing on most of our papers, the issue of the increase of the CBN interest rate. And we know this is just for the CBN. By the time it gets to the commercial banks, they will add their own interest on it. And we will recall early this year, or from last year early to this year, we saw where banks have been complaining the fact that most of the people that are approaching the banks for loan are basically for food. And then you could imagine that rather than approaching the bank to get a loan for a business, hopefully you get a profit and then you will return. Most people are approaching the banks to get a loan just so they can feed themselves. Now we know the way things are moving right now, and I'm trying to merge it together with our current inflation rate. And we saw that our inflation is about 33.7, and most of the factors that is basically for food and transportation. We know that lately, I mean, the scarcity of fuel and then the prices going up, even though it's beginning to gradually drop down as more fuel is being made available. But then I'm just looking into here, we already see private sectors are complaining. This is really going to put a lot of pressure on private sectors and all of that. And then let us also link it with the minimum wage that the federal government is actually saying. I mean, last week we're looking at 48,000, where I was really not happy with it, because I said, let's look at the 48,000 and then with the current reality Nigerians are facing presently, how much are you going to use to buy food? And let's not forget, for those who are living in rented houses, landlords have increased their rent. Why? Because even the cost of building materials is very expensive. A bag of cement right now, it's about 8,000 or more, depending on where you're buying it for. So I'm just hoping that with all of these factors there, I keep saying, I just hope that the government will look into, rather than less depending so much on increasing the interest rate, how about let's look into our exchange rate? How much is the naira in relation to the dollar? How about us working towards having more of our goods, finished goods, let's export it rather than depending on importation always. So there are quite a number of things that are actually putting so much pressure on our naira, and that is why we keep seeing that. And the CBN is saying they are not going back. The more inflation increases, the more they keep increasing. So Lois eventually will be seeing that very soon CBN will be looking into 30% interest rate.
It's almost there. First 26.25%.
True.
Is almost like 30%, because when you look at it, just like you've said, things are really going to add up in the market. Already we are complaining, people are going through a lot of hardship. People hardly even the needs now are becoming even more like your wants, because right now you have to start your needs, you have to start scaling them. Which one comes even more important? Meanwhile, they are needs, they are not even your wants, but you have to still scale them to see which one comes important and comes first in when you're talking about importance. So it's really something that, just like we have seen from the riders, people are saying it's going to pose danger to the economy. It highlights negative impacts on investment, inflation, and it's burden for businesses as well. That is just exactly what is going to happen. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see how far the CBN will go with this. And I just hope that something else will come, and all these reforms that we are having, economic reforms, the president has assured us that we will smile later. So we are hoping, because the way things are going, they are really going bad every day, despite the fact that people are wailing and protesting, and NLC is there trying to see how they can manage to see how they can get a proper amount for the minimum wage. And what we're seeing the federal government giving is really not good. This 54,000 naira from 48 to 50, there's no much difference now. So I'm hoping that NLC and the federal government will reach a proper agreement, that the federal government will give a proper amount, that even if they don't, it's not up to that 615,000 naira that the NLC is proposing, which some people are saying is outrageous. But we see that the federal government reaches an amount that is reasonable, at least. Yes.
Truly, this whole thing is becoming something. Well, just like you said, we're just being hopeful on how things will turn out to be. Let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Then, still on the big story on the 26.25% interest rate that was being introduced by the CBN. We have private sector fears loan repayment crisis. Previous interest rate hikes killing businesses. 1.5 trillion naira bad loans may rise. This is coming from operators. More detail found on page 19 of the Punch newspaper. Tinubu okay $750 million for rural electrification. More detail in the paper. Naira slide pushes Dangote diesel to 1,001 per liter. Detail found on page 20. Reps panel to probe faulty presidential aircraft. And also on minimum wage, we see meeting adjourned as Labour reject fresh 54,000 naira offer. Still on the Punch newspaper, medical tourism spending falls by $5.24 million coming from the CBN. And Fubara here is saying, I didn't start governing fully until this February, possibly because of the issue he has been having with Wiki, the back and forth and all of that. So we hope that the people of River will start enjoying good governance right now that he's beginning to really get time to do his work. Still on the Punch newspaper, Oyo Assembly approves Makende's 100 billion naira loan request. More detail found on page 11. And on failed robbery, Lagos varsity student escaped death. More detail on page 4 and 5. Excuse me. And the last story I will be taking on the paper here says police launch manhunt for Ogun woman's abductors. Data found on page 5. We have a picture story on the front page. You can do well to get the Punch here in more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
Coming to the Blueprint newspaper, we have on politics 2027. APC tackles Atiku Obi over merger talk. Ganduje targets more states. Tinubu's re-election. The big story on this paper says 54,000 naira minimum wage offer, a joke carried too far. This is coming from Labour, and talks continue on Wednesday. ASU threatens nationwide strike. From the top of the Blueprint newspaper, Zulum says building Borno of the future to 26.25%. On sports, Federation Cup, 5 Premier teams face elimination. Smoking kills 80 million annually. This is coming from Saudi Arabia. Generator fumes kill 70H. Plans mass burial for 270 unclaimed corpses. You can find more details on page 7. And these are all the news stories you can find on the Blueprint newspaper.
Right, let's take a look at Daily Independent newspaper. Federal government insists on patronage of Nigerian catering service by foreign airlines. More detail in the paper. APC chief time blasts party for dashing Nigerians' hopes in 9 years. More detail found in the paper as well. The big story for the Daily is on national minimum wage. Governors absent stall negotiation as Labour reject the fresh 54,000 naira offer. NLC TUC insists on May 31st deadline to embark on strike. More detail found in the paper. Senate shut down move for new grazing routes, seeks solution to headers attacks. More detail found on page 7. And I hope that they come up with something more like say permanent solution laws to this issue. I was sharing the fact that we know that it's already the rainy season, so definitely farmers are already planting, but then what do we now do concerning the cattle that are roaming around? Because you definitely will see headers. Definitely we're going to be seeing headers and farmers clash right now, and some of these crops are already up. So imagine these cattle is now causing or eating up some of these crops. And then definitely farmers will want to retaliate because this is their own livelihood. The same way you are keeping cattle for your own livelihood. So I'm hoping that the Senate will be able to come with something tangible. That we will recall that there was a time they were giving solution to open grazing, and a number of governors were with or without. People were not really in support of it, because if you're saying we should have grazing, who is going? If the government shows what the government would do about banning to the issue of farmers and headers clash concerning this.
It's rather unfortunate that we have found ourselves in this particular situation, because before now we don't hear stories about farmers and headers clashing because of cattle and the farms. Although even if there were stories about that, it was rare, because from time we know that these headers, they go to the bush where there are enough grasses and you know, all of that for the cows to feed on. But going to somebody's farm to feed your cows, I don't think it's reasonable, because that person has put in money for probably, because if you look at a large hectare of farm, one person cannot cultivate that whole this thing. Definitely you need more hands, and probably like most of our villages, we know they do communal farming and all of that. If we go to this person's farm today, tomorrow we'll go to another. But in a situation whereby you are not that particular community, you don't have that kind of communal farming or whatever, you have to pay people. You see, you have invested your money in it to pay people to cultivate that farm. You have planted, the seeds have germinated, and then somebody will just bring cows to come and feed on them. Of course, you don't expect the person to be quiet and look at you and applaud you. Well done for feeding your cows with my farm, whatever. So definitely we'll have those clashes if these things are not being tackled. So just like you said, the Senate needs to, because since people have refused to use their conscience and their sense to do what is supposed to be done, because all of a sudden this thing just broke out and started happening, and then we're having issues here and there. People are killing cows, and then the herders are killing humans because of their cows and all of that. So if there's going to be a lasting solution to this particular problem, like you said, we've taken 40% out of insecurity and terrorism.
Honestly, we look forward to seeing it. So I will stop seeing cattle in the rural area, the urban areas.
If it's dry season, I think it's not very okay to even see them around in the towns, you know, but at least we can overlook that. But during the rainy, just like in the areas, we have people that own goats.
Yeah,
during the dry domestic, especially the goats. During dry season, you release them, remove the ropes and everything. They roam about, feed, so that you as the owner, you're not even stressed to be looking for what to feed them. But during the rainy season, you see that everybody will look for the rope, dust it, and start tying his goat, because you don't want problem with your neighbor. So that's just it.
All right, we look forward to seeing that. Still on Daily Independent newspaper, CBN raises interest rate to 26.25%, data found on page 6. The patriarchs to embark on nationwide advocacy mobilization for new constitution. More data found on page 6. ASU rejects new governing council, decries mushroom of the universities. You can find more detail on page 6. Tinubu's government reckless misplaces priorities in allocating funds, says Obi. Visit party national secretariat in company of the Labour Party supporters. Shaitima Yonuga Ganduji exonerate Tinubu from economic crisis, with the rider, "We are revocating APC to retain power in 2027," coming from Ganduji. Tinubu responsible for worsening standard of living. This is coming from the ACF. And downside of the paper, court declared Rivers local government chairman tenure extension unconstitutional. More data found on page 6. We have 2 picture story. You can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
The Voice of Liberty. From the top, we have nationwide strike imminent. This is coming from ASU. And Sele, I don't know. Anytime I see ASU threatening to go on strike, I feel some type of way, because you know, for the past years we have seen ASU go on strike regularly, like almost every year. Sometimes they even go on strike twice in a year, and the last one really lingered for a very long time, that students had to stay at home for after the COVID-19, the lockdown and everything. They went on strike, and you know, it was so long, and at least we had a space to breathe. Like the students now had a space to breathe, and then some of them were able to finish up their studies that they started like 5, 6, 7 years ago. They were able to finish, and then now, since last week, I think since last week, ASU has been on the papers and saying urging the federal government to look into their issue so that they won't have to go on strike, and on and on and on. So I'm just looking forward to see that the federal government takes them seriously, whatever the issue is about the governing board and all of that, that they want the federal government to implement, that they have promised things to do and they haven't done. I just hope that they will be able to do it so that us will not go on strike again, because I think most universities now have try to regain their balance and they are on track somehow to see that the academic calendar is going as it should. Now going on strike again would definitely destabilize the whole thing that they have tried to put in place. So I'm just hoping that the federal government sits with ASU and then they talk as they should and see how the way forward for this particular issue.
You know, for me, Lois, I think I'm very just like I share your pain as well, and I'm very sad each time I see the issue of strike. And that's why I've always asked the question: is this the only language the federal government understands? We'll see that when it comes to health sector, we'll see our resident doctors saying we're going on strike if you do not pay our hazard allowances and other allowances. We come to education, we see ASU saying we are going on strike if you do not do something. NLC are also threatening a strike if the government do not increase minimum wage. It's a matter of time, Lois, you hear that even College of Education and even our polytechnics will say they are going on strike as well because the federal government has failed to do something. And I asked this question in the educational sector, and they're supposed to go to education from. In fact, I remember when I saw the 2024 budget, I complained, how comes are we seeing that education is giving this small amount of money as if we're trying to manage in a way, okay, let's look for education, let's
make balance now, let's now put it,
not have a governing complaint. Even when it comes to the issue of education, you need to give it your total attention, because I keep saying, for any country to thrive, if we want to see growth, we want to see development, we need to give education the needed attention. I remember last year when the government is saying they needed more doctors, they should graduate more doctors. Do you want them to rush the work?
And when they said yesterday, if they are compensated well, they will do their jobs well. So
automatically you're giving an excuse for corruption.
Yes. So everybody's trying to look for better greener
let's just keep our fingers crossed, Lloyd, and hope that eventually the federal government will wake up from their sleep and actually realize that, you know what, this is a sector that we should not play with in any manner.
Right, back to the Voice of Liberty newspaper. North has oil in Nasarawa more than in southeast. This is coming from Sani Zangondaura. Again, Labour rejects federal government's 54,000 naira proposed new minimum wage. Again, terrorists attack Plateau village, kill 40, kidnap 20 in Abuja community. At least 40 people were reportedly killed when rampaging armed terrorists attacked Zurak village in Bashar district of Plateau State. On economy, rising inflation, CBN raises interest rate to 26.25%. Tinubu to inaugurate Abuja rail mass transit. This is coming from the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Rayson Wike, and Ganduje Damagum collaborating with Wike to overthrow Fubara's government. This is coming from Clark. And the last story here says Tinubu didn't create Nigeria's problems, he became president to solve them. This is coming from Isa Yuguda-led APC Forum. And that's all the news stories you can find on the Voice of Liberty.
All right, let's take a look at this day newspaper. UK government here is saying Nigeria's capital market needs $10 billion financing yearly to meet the SDGs by 2030. Detail found on page 9. Minimum wage talks, Labour reject NECA federal government's offer of 54,000 naira. Prosecutors say he has told ICC was established for African Russian leaders. Detail found on page 9. And coming from Ganduje, although not election period yet, we are working to secure Tinubu's re-election. Federal government policy focused on what works best for Nigeria, Sheitima 8 discloses. You can find more in the paper. Again, CBN raises the MPR to 26.25% to subdue inflation, and Cardoso is saying monetary tightening yielding desired outcome, banking system safe and sound despite the headwinds. Plan stronger regulatory framework for fintechs. NECA, Tiriba, CPPE says aggressive monetary tightening squeezing businesses and hurting borrowers. Naira sustained gain on official window, stable at the parallel forex market. More detail found in the paper. And the picture story here, we're seeing a Akpabio host finance minister. We hope that they're able to have talks that will make the country grow. More detail of that can be found in the paper, and that's all on this day newspaper. But before we move further, Lois, I'd like us to take a break. We've said quite a lot here, ranging from where we're seeing that Labour has refused the 54,000 naira that the federal government is providing, and as well we are seeing that CBN has increased the interest rate to about 26.25% already. We're having private sectors, investors are complaining that this will really affect businesses. So we would love to hear what your own inputs are concerning any of the stories. So do remember to drop it on our Facebook. Stay tuned with us. We'll be right back after the timeout.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at some of the top stories on the paper, ranging from ASU threatening strike again, Labour saying that they will not accept 54,000 naira, and as well CBN increasing the monetary policy rate to about 26.25%. So quite a lot happening on the papers. We would love to hear your own inputs concerning that. I still have Lloyd striking me. Thank you. All right, let's take a look at the next paper that we have.
Yes, the Nigerian Tribune. The big story here says tougher times ahead as CBN raises interest rates to 26.25%. The writer here says CCPC NECA analysts decry rate hike. Nigerians facing unbearable times due to your policies, ACF tells Tinubu. You can find more details on page 6 of Nigerian Tribune. From the top, we have court nullifies amendment of local government laws by pro-wiki lawmakers. Assembly screens confirms 8 commissioner nominees. If you're interested in this story, you can find it on page 3. On minimum wage, again, Labour rejects federal government's 54,000 naira offer. A meeting continues today. We'll look forward to the outcome of this particular meeting, hoping that it will not end in deadlock again. And the down part of the paper says Senate in fresh bid and herders through farmer conflict. The writer says reject Northern Senators' call to revisit grazing routes, plans national summit. You can find more details on page 3 of Nigerian Tribune. Kano Assembly amends Emirates Council bill amid speculation of Sanusi's return. Interesting. You can find more details on page 2. Court dethrones traditional strike anytime from now. This is coming from ASU. And insecurity, bandits kill over 40, raise several homes in Plateau community. You can find more details if you're from APC, and says Nigeria is comfortable with Tinubu. That's chairman of the Tata Group. Here you can check the Nigerian Tribune for more details.
Right on the leadership newspaper, starting with a big story, Fear Grips Plateau's resident as gunmen kill 50. With the writer, several houses razed, communities deserted, village head and youth leader confirm killing, security agency keep mum. And I wonder why this keep happening, Lois. Each time we have an attack, we always see that it's very difficult to get across to the security agents to come up. It's either you hear after placing a call, it's either the commissioner of police colleagues will say he was in a meeting, he can pick the call, or you see that network is terrible that they can't even reach across. And it's really sad for me, because I'm hoping that I'll see that our security apparatus will work as they should. We should see collaboration together with even the communication telcos, so that we can have good network services. And then how about fast response? Whenever we see that trouble communities are calling, we see that there's a quick response coming. But that has been reverse, has been the case. Let's look at Plateau State, Kaduna, Zamfara, Katsina, Benue, anywhere we see attack. We always have this issue that the security did not come. And here we are seeing that the security agency is mum about the whole thing. Now, security agency, as far as they are concerned, they are only told that 7 people died. And here we're saying most of our papers are having over 40 people were being killed. Community has been deserted. And this is not the first time we're saying that Wasiluka government this year alone has been attacked. So I'm hoping that, you know what, the government of the day should do something about this. It's one thing for us to have the information, this is what happened, but how about us having a preventive measure? We always look forward to see how we can correct what has happened already. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the government will do about this, because we saw, I think on Monday or so, where people that are suggesting maybe we should have a defense body outfit in Benue. Maybe that will stop the attack in Benue. But I mean, if that was the case, we shouldn't be having attack in Kaduna, because there's no place in the country that has more, security outfit the way Kaduna have. We have the entire defense, air force, marine, everything is there, yet it has been under attack over the years. So we're looking forward to see more proactive measure. Just like I said, we are like Oliver Twist. If you tell us you're doing, we need you to do more eventually. That is the only way Nigerians can feel the impact of our security agency eventually.
I totally agree with you, Sele. We'll keep talking and keep reminding the government that we need to be secure, because that's part of your duties when you were campaigning and saying you're coming to power, and all of those promises. You're supposed to take care of the people as well that you are governing, because if there are no people, then you don't have anybody to govern. So if the people keep dying, keep complaining about things, the same thing over and over again, then I think they should go back to the drawing board and see, okay, where have we gone wrong? Okay, these things that have gone wrong, how do we manage it? How do we see the way forward? So we are looking forward to see how in the nearest future our security outfits will do better, that will not have stories and reports that are saying they are calling them and their numbers are not reachable, they are saying they are in one meeting or the other. Your duty comes first, whatever meeting or whatever. We're talking about human lives here. So I think that should be utmost importance to any person that knows that, okay, my work is to safeguard the lives and properties of the citizens.
All right, we look forward to seeing that proactive measure coming from Kano Assembly set to amend Emirate Council law. And then we have Iran searches for a new future after Reza's death.
And federal government unveil 1.5 BP capacity data center. You can find more details on page 3. Why Banex Plaza remains shut. This is coming from Army. You can recall from on Saturday they had this clash between the traders there and then the army that got to this point that Banex Plaza is still shut till today. So if you're interested in more details, you can find it on page 22 of Nigerian News Direct newspaper. Now, Abiodun Edu rally public officers to shun financial recklessness. You can find more details on page 4. Interconnect debts. NCC 6 stakeholder input to develop stronger dispute resolution mechanisms. And these are all the news stories you can find on Nigerian News Direct newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at New Telegraph newspaper, still coming from Cardoso. Foreign investors' feedback on Nigeria's economy positive as MPC hikes lending rate to 26.25%, retained the CRR at 45%. OPS described increase as burden on investors. More detail found in the paper. Nigeria, Saudi to resume joint flight on $6 trillion cargo market. And Power probe House Senate step down adoption of report. Reps want armed forces exempted from airport, train stations, seaport tolls. Detail found on page 4. And 10 billion naira National Assembly Park recreational facility misplaced priority. This is coming from the Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi. We are working to restore power. May 27, TCN tells the Northeast governors. More detail found on page 28. The big story here is on hardship. Chaos loom, life becoming tough for average citizens. This is coming from the ACF warning the president. Nigerians should be patient with us, coming from the presidency. Shetima is saying our policy focus on what works best for Nigeria. President has performed, coming from the APC, says Atiku Obi united by distant for Tinubu. More detail found inside the paper. Year-on-year average fuel retail prices rises by 176%, diesel by 68%, coming from the MBS. One dead, others injured as London Singapore flight hits severe turbulence. More detail of that can be found on page 4 for those who are interested in the international scene. And remittance, we have no record of NNPC Limited, FRSC tells the reps. You can find more of that on page 7. Tension in Kano over recall of Emirate Council bill. And still a New Telegraph newspaper on the new minimum wage. Again, Labour reject federal government's fresh 54,000 naira offer. Talks continue today. 40 kill, houses burned in fresh Plateau attack. And outside we have a study here that says that PFAS exposure linked to health issues in offspring. You can do out read more detail of that study on page 7. And that's all in New Telegraph newspaper.
The Matrix newspaper from the top, we have Nigeria, Saudi Arabia to resume joint cargo flights in scramble for $6 trillion market. This is coming from Festus Kiyamo. On sports, EPL, Chelsea confirm Pochettino's exit after one such season in charge. You can find more details on page 16. And worsening economic conditions, ACF blames the federal government, says policies put in place by government immediate causes of problems. Peter Obi's staunch supporter Kenneth Okonkwo dumps incompetent corrupt Labour Party. You can find more details on page 3. Treasonable felony case, you have no jurisdiction to try Nnamdi Kanu. Lawyers files preliminary objection. The big story here on new minimum wage, federal government organized labor to continue negotiation. 54,000 naira offer, very unsubstantial. Labor firms negotiation may continue on Wednesday, and organized labor insists on May 31st as the ultimatum. On politics 2027, Atiku will be united by mutual desperation, says APC. And Senate to call National Summit regarding farmers' herders conflict. You can find more details on page 3 on the Matrix newspaper. And amid inflation, CBN raises interest rate to 26.25%. You can find more details on page 11. And on entertainment, Africa Magic Viewer Choice Award 10, a night of glamour and glees. And that's all the news stories you can find on this paper.
All right, let's take a look at First News newspaper. CBN hike interest rate to 26.25% amid rising inflation. And then Yul Edochie saying that's on entertainment. I treated Junior Pope like a brother, but he betrayed me. There have been a number of controversy concerning the way he dressed and so many other things concerning celebrities that attended the burial. You can do well to read more detail of that inside the paper. And on May 30th, postponed event on Biafra Heroes Day, IPOP urges Unizik VC WAEC board. More can be found inside the paper. Reps demand airport personnel audit, summon Kiyamo over safety concern. Pro-Fubara lawmakers confirm 8 commissioners for Rivers cabinet. And also Plateau tragedy, we have how bandits ravaged Zurak village, killed over 40. The big story, minimum wage stalemate continues as Labour reject increment to 54,000 naira, says federal government proposes figures fail to recognize true economic contributors. More detail found in the paper. Kano Assembly initiate Emir's law amendment amidst call for Sanusi's reinstallment. You can find more of that in the paper. Iranians nationwide mourn president entourage killed in tragic helicopter crash. And then Rivers crisis, my governance commenced in February 2024 when we started taking decisions, coming from Governor Fubara. APC chieftain slammed Tinubu, no Lagos miracle on national stage. You can find more in the paper, and we have a picture story showing us the Federal Ministry of Finance during the office of the Accountant General of the Federation during a retreat that they had. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any other story that is of interest to you from the paper.
The Nation newspaper, the big story here says Shetima, government's tough options prevented economic downfall. And petrol subsidy cut has impacted positively, says Yuguda Ganduje lists fees. From the top, we have minimum wage talks continue today after Labour rejects federal government's 54,000 naira offer. And states lose battle over hold on council's funds. You can find more details on page 4. Fubara swears in commissioners dared by 3 lawmakers. You can also find more details on page 4 of the Nation newspaper. And here we have Hamzat, top government functionaries beat Lagos Speaker's father by. You can find more details on page 5. And on economy, experts differ with CBN over interest rate hike, says lending now attracts 26.25%. Apex Bank collaborating with fintechs to boost financial sector. State varsities for student loan. You can find more details on page 3 of the Nation newspaper. And court sacks monarch in Ondo after 29 years of rule.
On the point, we have again Labour reject federal government fresh 54,000 naira minimum wage offer. Governor's absence stall negotiation. Labour insists on May 31st deadline for implementation. Discussion continues today. Investors stay bullish despite policy rate hike as ASI increased by 0.11%. Banks not under pressure over recapitalization coming from Kadusu. And on politics, Osun government APC trade wars over alleged plot to kill Adeleke. And here on news, we have Tinubu not responsible for Nigerians' hardship, says Isa Yunuda. And then also we have downside of the paper, we have relief for Abure as Peter Obi finally endorses him as Labour Party chairman, where we hope that whatever issue that he was under the probe is done. You can do well to find more detail of any other story in the paper, and that's all on the Point newspaper.
On the Business Day newspaper, the big story is manufacturers exports ride weaker naira to 9-year high, triples in 1 year. CBN signals rate pause ahead after third straight hike to 26.25%. On insecurity, over 40 people killed in renewed Plateau attack. You can find more details on page 2 of the Business Day newspaper. Building Nigeria's Rural Electrification Agency, coming from Abba Aliyu, speed, strategy and success in Nigeria on voicemail as investors answer Angola's call with $50 billion. That's all the news stories on Business Day.
All right, I think that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Lois, for doing this with me. All right, and thank you to our viewers and our supporters for keeping this moment with us on the dailies. We look forward again to doing this tomorrow. To have a great day ahead.